Hey, it's Clutch City Chatter time. I'm Jeff, and today I'm going to discuss some of my sports fan history. I've been an Astro fan literally since when I was a baby. My grandparents had season tickets for 20 some odd years, and they used to take me as a baby. They would tell me stories later, taking me to the ball game in my diapers. So they taken me to the ball games until I was old enough to start taking them to ball games. And they had season tickets, two sets of season tickets every year. So sometimes when we'd go, we'd sit between third base and home on the second level seating. And sometimes we'd sit in the outfield, which we called the peanut gallery. And I definitely preferred actually sitting between third and home. It was much closer to the action. I preferred that. Some of my favorite memories, childhood memories, are just going to the Astrodome and cheering on my Stros. Back then, my favorites were Bob Watson, Art Howe, and James Rodney Richard. And man, J.R. Richard was something to behold. He was amazing. I was just in awe of J.R. I know there were a few times when his pitches were clocked at 103 miles per hour. Uh, he was a huge man, also. I don't have it right in front of me, but I believe he was 6'7" or 6'8". Big man. And it was such a tragedy that he had a stroke in his sixth season. He was a surefire Hall of Famer if he had pitched, 4 or 5 more years. He was something that was unlike anything baseball had really seen. And so he had that stroke, and he tried to come back about a year later, and he was never able to regain the success. He gave up pretty much before he even got to pitch again in the majors. He pitched some in the minors, and just never could get back to what he had. So his story was tragic, but man, I was a fan of his. He was incredible. So when I was 7 years old, I was the Gulf Coast chapter's cystic fibrosis poster child, and there was all kinds of awesome things that I got to do because of that. People I got to meet, and I personally got to meet Earl Campbell. So it was in 1978 when I got to meet Earl Campbell, and man, it was a few hours after the game. They had just returned from Pittsburgh, the playoff game that they lost, and he had this engagement it was like CF Gala that he came to, and so I got to meet him, and I was just in awe of the size of his thighs. His thighs were bigger than my entire body. I thought, oh my gosh, no wonder this guy's so hard to tackle. On one occasion, during the year that I was the CF poster child, I got to go onto the floor of the Astrodome and meet Craig Reynolds, Astros shortstop at the time. And so that was a last he left a lasting impression on me just because he was such a genuinely nice guy. And he was a professional athlete, an Astro. So I was kind of, I guess, awestruck, and we got to stay for that game. Ken Forsch pitched for the Astros. I believe he threw a one-hitter. So it was a great game. And I remember, though, when I was on the field, it was like a dream to me as it was happening. I remember looking out into the stands and just couldn't believe how massive this place was and how many fans it could hold. I'd never been in a building that big before. You strain your neck looking up to the ceiling. And I thought about it, and I was just like dumbfounded on how major league players can play in this place and not just be completely like in a shell. awestruck themselves, I guess, at the place that they were playing. Um, it was one of the most wonderful experiences of my life, just getting to be down there and converse with a couple of major league ball players and meet an announcer, and it was spectacular. Um, so when I was old enough to start earning enough money to get season tickets to the Astros, I did that for a couple of years while they were still at the Astrodome. One of the years I went in, did season tickets with my cousin and my best friend, and the three of us would go to games, and that was a lot of fun. At that time, the Astros were pretty bad. That season, they were pretty bad. Um, but then another year, I did season tickets with my doctor, who was also a good personal friend of mine. But my doctor and I got season tickets, and that year was the year that the Astros traded for Randy Johnson. So that was 1998, and that I think was probably the Astros' best team ever. Uh, I guess with the possible exception of 2005 and the present Astro team. But at least up until that point in the franchise history, 1998, they fielded the best team they'd ever had. And so the Astros, when they traded for Randy Johnson, I believe that was right around August 1st, and he made 10 starts. No, he made 11 starts before the playoffs started, and Randy was 10 wins and 1 loss, and it was like Randy Johnson mania in Houston. He was unhittable. He was he was every bit as good as J.R. Richard was, 20 years earlier. So the Astros made the playoffs that year in 1998, and their first round matchup was with the San Diego Padres. And Dr. Glasser and I went. We only got tickets to Game One of the series, and we had seats that were in the outfield in the peanut gallery. And Randy Johnson was pitching, um, but the Astros were facing Kevin Brown, and up until that point, Kevin Brown had a good season, and he was I guess the ace of the staff for the Padres, but he hadn't been pitching the way Randy Johnson had been pitching. But I guess that was news to him because man, Kevin Brown was unhittable in the series, and it was sad. We lost 3 games to 1, and so that 1998 team that had been the best Astro team in franchise history was out of the playoffs once again in round one because they ran into the buzzsaw of Kevin Brown. But there was really no disgrace in losing to the Padres. The Padres went on to win the World Series that year. Then from 1998 to 2004, I went to many Astro games. And most of them, most of those seasons were not good seasons. There were some 100 plus lost seasons in there. So they weren't a good team, but I still enjoyed and still pulled for them and still followed almost every game. If I wasn't at the game, I was watching it on TV. And in 2004, I moved to Missouri. Probably the hardest part of moving away from Houston. Well, I should say the hardest part of moving away from Houston was leaving family that was nearby, near Houston. The second most difficult thing about leaving Houston was leaving the Houston Astros, not being able to attend games whenever I wanted. But it was then, so we left in 2004, and it was in 2005 that the Astros actually made it to their first World Series. It was kind of surreal watching Jason Lane put away the last out against the Cardinals in the NLCS in 2005 and seeing the Astros going to their first World Series. My wonderful Aunt Helen had season tickets to the Astros for many, many, many years, and she was able to get some World Series tickets that year, and she invited me to go to the game. It was Game 3. It was the first game in Houston. So it was the first World Series game Houston had ever hosted, and I got to go, and it was so exciting. I know I had a smile on my face all the way on the drive from Missouri to Houston. So the 2005 World Series was the Houston Astros against the Chicago White Sox. And the first two games of the series were in Chicago, and the Astros lost them. So they came to Houston then for games 3 and 4. And like I said, was at game 3. And it was an unbelievable game. So at the end of 9 innings, it was tied 5-5. In the 14th inning, the Chicago White Sox scored 2 runs. One of them was from a former Astro, Jeff Blum, hitting a home run. Jeff Blum spent the majority of his career with the Houston Astros and is now the current broadcaster for the Houston Astros. But that year, he was with Chicago White Sox, and he did it to us Astros. So 5.5 hours after the first pitch, the game ended in heartache once again. Something that had become pretty commonplace for Astro fans. And the following night, I watched Game 4 on TV with my girlfriend in Galveston, Texas. And that game wasn't near as close, and Astros lost, and that was the World Series. So Houston was swept in 4 games. But that was all right because we finally broke the glass ceiling, keeping us from the World Series. So it would be 12 more years before the Astros made it to their next World Series appearance, the 2017 World Series. But that became one of the most talked about and remembered World Series ever. As we all know, like it or not, the Houston Astros won the World Series in 2017. You can't take that away from them. You can't take that away from them. Now, the Houston Astros are the most dominant team in baseball over the last 6 years. While true Astro fans like myself believe that the 2017 World Series championship was 100% legitimate, they still need to win another World Series ring to prove to the world that they are one of Major League Baseball's true dynasties. This is the year they do it. Now you have a little bit of history of what made me the Astro fan that I am today. I hope you've enjoyed my little jog down memory lane. And I hope that you will hit like and please subscribe. And until next time, swing for the fences.